You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGachy, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
Hey, good people. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. JD, man, he was such a treat to talk to, and he's really a monster player, and I love his style, so if you've never heard of him before today, please go check him out. But before you do, listen to this episode, and I think you'll appreciate him even more. Just want to take a second before we get into this episode to remind you about the Facebook group. There's a Facebook group attached to this podcast. It is called The Tone Mob. It's a private group, so you can join. There's a couple thousand of us in there hanging out, talking about food, talking about guitar stuff, talking about anything that might pop up on this podcast, and it's really the best place on Facebook. And I know that doesn't sound like much because Facebook is a cesspool, but this is really a nice respite from all the craziness in the interwebs and on that particular platform. It's really a nice place, and the community there is just fantastic. So I just wanted to remind everyone about that. And real quick, if you really enjoy this show and you like to help keep the lights on, you can go over to Patreon and you can check out what we have to offer there. One of the main things is extra episodes. If you really like this show, for $5 a month, you get an extra episode delivered to your ears every week, and usually that comes in the form of an extended conversation with that week's guest. So if you could, go to patreon.com/tonemob to check that out. All right, that's enough plugging. Let's get into this episode with JD. You're seriously going to like it. He is a delight of a man. So here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar tone and the people behind it. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I'm very excited to let you know I'm talking to JD Simo. How's it going, man?
It's going great, man. Thanks for having me.
Dude, I'm pumped about this. This is gonna be fantastic.
Oh, man. Hope I don't disappoint, man.
I can tell that's not gonna happen. I can already tell. You know, when you get that initial vibe, you can feel it, and then it's just like, oh, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be totally fun.
I'm down, man.
One thing I forgot to tell you before we started recording, and this is just great for all of the listeners to hear. If you didn't see the notice, if you want to put your phone on Do Not Disturb real quick, because if you get a phone call, we'll get kicked off, and I forgot to tell you that. So
really.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Which isn't, again, the end of the world, but, you know, why have it happen?
No, but that's really good. All right. Well, I'm putting my phone on Do Not Disturb because, you know, that's because I don't want to be disturbed anyway. I'm disturbed enough. I don't need help.
Yeah, dude. I can relate. So I'm going to let the listeners know. So I found out about you, as I told you off the air, through Daniel Donato, who came on this podcast, and he's like, JD Simo, and I was like, I don't know JD, and he's like, you don't know JD? I'm like, no. And so he's like, you gotta listen to JD. So I did. And fast forward however many months later that is, I was like, man, this guy rules. And your people hit me up, and I was like, absolutely got to talk to this guy because he's got epic tone. His guitar stuff is incredible, and you know we got to do this, right? But what I don't know, I don't really know your story at all. So tell me your backstory. When did you get started, and what's the legend like?
The legend like? Well, I grew up in Chicago. Was born in the late 80s, and I grew up in the city, in an apartment building, and I saw Elvis on television, like when I was 3 years old, 2 or 3, and I also saw the my older sister. My father was 50 years old when I was born, so he had a whole family of 4 kids that he had raised back in like the 60s, and they were part of my life. And so anyway, one of my older sisters, my stepsisters, used to live with us from time to time, and she was a big Saturday Night Live fan, and so we used to watch all those movies. And so I saw the Blues Brothers when I was, 2, 3 years old, and I fell in love with Steve Cropper. And so those 2 things made me want to play music. And so I got a guitar when I was, 4. And I took lessons from this guy in the neighborhood. But really, I just fell in love with records like everybody else, and I was real fortunate because growing up in the city like that, I had access to an incredible public library that had like every record ever made. And we also had great record stores around us. So, and I being a kind of an odd kid, who just liked to sit and listen to records and was kind of a loner. I had I had these guys at the record store, and I also had like this librarian at the library who would feed me good stuff, because I would just come in and voraciously tear it apart. And so starting with Elvis, and then obviously with Cropper, it was like Stax, learning about Stax, and they had like every Stax 45 ever, even the really hard to find stuff. And so those are 2 really good ways in, because you can kind of mushroom out from there in a lot of different directions. And so taught myself how to play, and I started playing like in bars and stuff when I was 7 and 8 and 9, and and then my family relocated to Phoenix, Arizona when I was a teenager, and I was already gigging every week, when I was 12 and 13, with bands of people that were way older than me. And I dropped out of high school when I was 15 and left home to go play music full time, and ended up in Nashville. I toured all over the country from then until I turned, right before I turned 21 is when I moved to Nashville. And and so that's kind of the condensed version. And
so you've been in Nashville ever since?
Yeah, I've been here for like 13 years. Yeah, 13, 14 years. So, yeah. So I've seen the whole change of the town. When I moved here, it was still very small, and everybody knew each other. And when somebody new moved to town, it was you go around and you could hit all the like 5 major scenes of like monstrous players and cliques, all in one night, and wait for an opportunity to try and get in, and then to get your opportunity, and you either suck or you don't. and that's it, So
Yeah, I have a really strong connection with Nashville. I consider it my home away from home. I've been there, I don't know how many times at this point, but I've seen the evolution too. And what's weird is like it seems to have came in like huge leaps. So I remember going there when I was a kid. I was like, I don't know, maybe like 11 or 12, something like that. And, hanging out in Tootsie's and like seeing all this stuff. And then like coming back years later as an adult, right before the whole, how should we call it? Screaming bridesmaids thing happened. And then it was like 2 years later, or a year and a half later, something like that. I came back, and then that's all it was. And I was like, what happened to my beautiful place? What's going on right now?
Yeah. I mean, it's
so weird.
It's changed. It's changed. I mean, it's sort of when everything really, really started to change is right around the time that I stopped, like I left the Don Kelly band that Daniel took my place in, and downtown. And, right then is when things were really starting to change. And that's when I hopped out of playing on people's records and doing sessions all the time and stuff, and made my own records and touring, where now that's all I do, I used to tour.
Right.
And, I was a road dog, man. 2016 was crazy. We did 262 shows in 2016
Whoa.
alone. Yeah, we were gone over 300 days that year. I'm never doing that again.
That sounds awful.
I thought I'd road dog. Well, I signed my first record deal, in 2015, and so 2016 was when the first like official, record came out, and so it was just like, playing all over the world and playing all over the country, and it was just crazy. And so, yeah, I had road dogged hard in my life before that, but that was an intense freaking year. So anyway, but yeah, man, the town has changed. The town has changed, and I don't even know what it is anymore, because it's at least up until the pandemic, I would go out on the road for 2 months or 3 months, and I'd come home for 2 weeks and not really do much, other than listen to records and drink coffee and visit with buddies, So
that sounds nice.
Yeah, sort of recharge between tours and stuff, and but yeah, man, it's people ask me all the time, because I live here, what. How do you get plugged in, and how do you, do it and all that? And I'm like, man, I don't even know anymore, man, because the town that I moved to and did it in is no longer here, man. I don't even know.
I mean, I still love it. Don't get me wrong. I can't wait to go back.
Oh, yeah. No, it's my home. It's my home. I love it. I mean, I spent the better part of my youth not having a home, just traveling around and sleeping wherever I could. And when I moved to Nashville, I had a blow-up bed from Walmart and a trash bag of clothes and a beat-up old car, and that was it. And it's been great to have a home, and got a wife and a little kid, and it's have a real life. It's beautiful.
Totally. Yeah, and there's still things happening there. As much as I'm like bemoaning the touristy nature of some of the things that have happened, there's still like, it's still the spot. Like, it's still the spot. Like, you can find, if there's a sort of music you're into, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're gonna be able to find it. It's definitely there.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. That's why I came here, man.
So, I know this is supposed to be a guitar podcast, kind of ish, sort of. I don't know. I don't know anymore what it is. It's just a podcast with guitar players, more so than a guitar podcast. Yeah,
I can dig it.
But
yeah.
What is what's your rig looking like these days? Actually, what might be kind of fun to explore is, how did the rig evolve? Because you've had everything, I'm sure, at this point, in some form or fashion.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've completely gone the opposite direction of acquisition, and I've sort of gotten really into cheap old gear. But when I started here in town in Nashville, I had what everybody has. I had like a boutique-y kind of amp and a big pedal board with a bunch of stuff on it, and boutique guitars and all that. And as I started playing with the Don Kelly band, I got myself an old deluxe reverb, and ended up getting a real nice. Everybody wanted to give me Telecasters back when I was doing that gig, because that's what that gig is. And so I ended up getting this really great custom built Telecaster from these guys up in Kentucky, and it was great. And so I eventually whittled down where I was using no effects at all. I was just plugging straight into the amp. And that was kind of a long process, because, I was with Don for 6 years, 12 or 1,300 gigs or something like that, something crazy like that. And So, it was kind of a gradual process. And during that time, that's when I started playing on records. And in the beginning, it was, just playing on custom projects or, going to home studios and stuff like that. And then eventually, after a couple years, then it was, playing on masters and working on, big label records and songs on the radio and stuff like that. And so, I had a big toolbox of stuff for that. But even that, like by the time that I sort of got to wanting to make my own records and sort of get out of that life, which I can talk about because it's kind of, because basically what ended up happening is, I moved, like I said, I moved to town with nothing. And in a relatively short amount of time, all of a sudden, it's like I had a house and a mortgage and, I was making more money than I ever thought I could as a musician. And, but after several years of playing on sessions every day and then going and playing with Don at night, I was just burnt out. I was like a 25-year-old who felt like he was in his 40s. I just, music had become a job, and I had the fortitude at least to sort of be like, well, why am I unhappy? Like I got money and I've got success and, if I just keep my head down and keep doing this, I'll probably be all right, especially if I'm smart about it. And, but I was miserable. And so, I met some like-minded session players and started my band, which was called Simo. And we went off and did what we did. And now I'm still here making records and doing things the way that I want to do them. And I'm grateful for that. But anyway, right around that time that I stopped doing sessions and left Don's band, I was really into old Marshalls, from the 60s. And so I had a whole phase of using like old 100-watt and 50-watt Marshalls from the 60s. And I got really into vintage equipment and ended up getting my old 335 that I still play, my old 62 335. And I had people, it was crazy, man. I mean, people were like I had a real burst on loan to me for a couple of years.
Whoa,
and
like a 59?
I had, it was a 60 and
60.
Yeah. And then a whole bunch of stuff. Everybody started bringing me stuff they'd come to gigs and stuff like that and bring me stuff to use and play and borrow and all this stuff. And it was partway through all that I went back to using Fender amps. And again, I never really got into using effects ever again. I mean, the wah-wah pedal through that whole phase was all I had. I didn't use any other effects. And then I got frustrated with that because it was just so, I mean, it was really fun and invigorating, but it was, I just felt like the sound that was coming out was just so steered in a very specific direction. I wanted something that was a little bit more open. And so I went back to the deluxe reverb for a while, using that. And that led to using super reverbs and using Vibroluxes and twins and all this kind of stuff. And here in the last year or so, I've really gotten into old Ampegs, though. I've got specifically Geminis from the early 60s, Gemini 1s and Gemini 2s. And, for me, they're better. They're basically like Ampeg's version of a blackface Fender, but they sound better. They really do. They've got more mid-range and they don't have the ice picky highs and they don't have the muddy lows. And, I mean, I've been doing a ton of scoring, ton of it, and a ton of recording through this whole pandemic thing because I release a new. I have my own. I have my weekly live stream show, Greasy Time, where every week there's a new funk instrumental with a funny music video to go along with it, and lots of other things like that. A lot of collaborations with other buddies of mine, and the Ampegs just do it, man. And they're, an old Gemini is like $400 or $500 maybe, and not enough people are hip to them. But I mean, all the people. It's funny because like all the people that I really love out there in the world right now, like my buddy Jimmy James from the Delvon Lamar Organ Trio, or like Tommy Brennick, or any of the guys from Daptone, they're all hip to him, you know. So it's like there's a certain like faction of people that are hip to him, but not the general public at large. And
It's
they're
surprising
better,
to
man.
me. Like, you know what I mean? Like so this is really funny that we're talking about old Ampeg. Sorry to interrupt you there, but
No.
if it wasn't for my 1965 Ampeg J12, we wouldn't be
Yeah.
talking right now. Like, we literally wouldn't be talking right now, because I posted that amp. This is why it's kind of important to me. It sounds amazing, and the tremolo and reverb in it is ridiculous. But
Yep.
I posted that amp on March 19th of 2015 on Instagram. It was my first ever Instagram post. It was my first ever social media post, really. Like, and people started liking and commenting on it, and that was what made me realize that, hey, maybe I could do this internet thing. And so I started posting gear, and that led to starting the podcast, and here we are. So it all comes back to that beautiful little 65 J12 that I have sitting here in the corner. And so,
Man,
yeah, I'm
killer,
with you on
man.
it, man.
Yeah, I just don't. I got rid of all my old Fenders, man. I just don't, because I'm not going to use them. Like, they're just not, you know, like and Gabe Roth from Daptone has been a really big inspiration to me as like an engineer and as a producer and all that. And, you know, he highly recommends, he's like, man, you got to do blind taste tests. Otherwise you're never going to know what you really think of something, you know? And it's like, and it can be anything. It can be an amplifier, it can be a microphone, it can be, you know, anything. And so, you know, oftentimes when I'm trying to make, you know, when I'm trying to sort of decide about something, I'll do that. You know, I'll set microphones up and not label them and go in the control room and listen. And it's funny how many times it's like not what you think. Yeah, because that's the thing. It's like we live in a very visual time, so it's you sort of you know, more often than not, people use their eyes rather than their ears, and it's like, you know, it's music, man. You know, it's not supposed to necessarily be a visual experience at all. You know, which is a whole nother kind of tangent I can way go off into, the importance of sort of shutting your eyes, especially if you're learning or something like that, because it's like you just miss so much if you don't use your ears, you know. And there's a big divide going on right now, I hear, in like, you know, because basically like my generation, in the, you know, people who are in their 30s, like, you know, we're the last ones to sort of learn how to play the way everyone learned to play up to that point, you know, meaning that, you know, you listen to records and you just listen to it over and over and over again, and you do it until you get it. Whereas, you know, now there's all these different ways that a person can learn. And, you know, there's definitely, I mean, there's always, I'm not going to poo-poo the whole thing, but it's just, when it comes to like vibrato and hand strength and like learning how to get a good tone just out of your hands and not relying on any pieces of equipment for it. Those are all like very non-sexy things to kind of nail. They're kind of boring and they take a lot of effort. And it's subtle, you know? And so like if you're moving fast and you're learning stuff fast, it's like, it's really easy to skip over those things, you know, and go right to kind of the payoff or the thing that's going to give you some sense of instant gratification. And that's so bad when it comes to like playing. That's like the opposite of what you should be doing, you know? And I can hear it, you know, because like that's the difference between like a good guitar player and a great guitar player, you know, is, you know, it's like, it doesn't sound like music or does it sound like notes, you know? It's like when it sounds like music, it's like that's what you're looking for, you know? Because something can be really, really screwed up and really primitive and really raw. You know, like I love all this, hill country Mississippi stuff like Junior Kimbrough or Arl Burnside or something, or Mississippi Fred McDowell, or I love Lightning Hopkins. I mean, I'm a huge Lightning Hopkins fan. And it's like, it can be something really, really kind of like out of tune and rough, but it's beautiful. It sounds like music, whereas, if it's something it's just notes, it's just notes. I mean, what good is it? It's not music.
That's a really good way to put it. I never really thought about it that way. I like a lot of fairly abrasive stuff, and a lot of people don't hear the beauty in it that I hear. And I'm like, that's the thing. Well, that guy's just playing one chord the whole time, or well, that guy's just like, it's just feedback, or it's just whatever. And it's like, but listen to it. Listen to it. It's something. And there's something there.
Yeah, and that's what binds all good music together. I mean, that's the thing. That's why, like a deep music nerd, a person who like loves to listen to music, and like I'm as much of a Spotify junkie as I am a record junkie, and that's why it's like you could, like I can listen to Stark Reality or the Pixies or John Lee Hooker or Iggy Pop and the Stooges or Dinosaur Jr. or Nina Simone or, I mean, it's like, what do all these things have in common? Well, absolutely nothing, except they're all fucking great.
Right.
So,
dude, exactly.
And that's another thing that's really important. Something that like through this whole pandemic, like with my live stream and also with all of like, I do a podcast myself and all these other things I'm doing. It's like, I just voraciously like listen to music and I pump it out there of like, check this, like my Instagram stories are, and it, cause it's never been easier to access music, and, cause like when I was learning to play just back in the 90s, man, like even if you got hip to something cool, you had to go find it, like you had to maybe like order it or like wait like 3 weeks for it to come in the mail. And Lord knows if like maybe you got the wrong record, like maybe, like you didn't get the exact right record from this person's catalog. And it's like nowadays you can just go on and go down a rabbit hole. And, there's all these great players that some of which I already mentioned, like Jimmy James from the Delmar Lamar Organ Trio is like, I mean, he is like a master of old school R&B and soul and knows, I mean, I'm pretty deep, but like he's got me where I'm like, I don't know that record, bro. And it's cool, man, because it's like you can go down that rabbit hole and learn. I mean, it's nothing, and that's why it's like nothing against, like I love Jimi Hendrix, I love all that stuff, but it's like, man, I've heard all that stuff. I've garnered a lot of enjoyment and I've learned a lot from that stuff. It's like, but what about the stuff that I don't know about, and you'd be surprised out there, like, especially touring around like I do. It's amazing to me how many people, I meet on a daily basis, like that are like working musicians or touring musicians who, aren't voracious music listeners. And it's like, man, that's like a carpenter who never goes to the forest, It's like, you got to get some wood.
You gotta know where it comes from, right? You gotta
I mean, you gotta
expand.
Well, yeah, and you gotta get, the only way to have depth is to have depth. There's no shortcut to it. You gotta fill your tank up, so anyway.
What's nice for me is I have this weird cheat code that most people don't have, which is I get to podcasts with all different people and they tell me about things. And I'm like, okay, noted. Never heard of that before. Noted. All right. We'll investigate that later. It's like, I don't think that many people have that option, even if they are like a working musician. I'm like, I'm talking to people from punk rock bands, from blues bands, from, basement pedal builders, like all kinds of different areas. If it involves guitar, I'm talking to them, basically that's my goal. And so I get to find all these things that I never would have heard about. Probably, there's a good chance.
Yeah.
Such as, I mean, you're an example of that. Like, I might not have heard of you if Daniel hadn't suggested, and I'm like, oh God,
Yeah.
and he was very insistent about it too, I should say.
Oh, well, God bless him, man. Bless him. I've known him so long. It's just crazy. Like I was saying, because I was saying, folks, like off the air, like, I first met Daniel when, I mean, he was like 11 or maybe it was 12, but he was really young. And, I keep mentioning this band that I was in for a long time that he took my place in, the Don Kelly band here in Nashville, which is like a honky tonk band that like goes back to the late 70s. And like every great guitar player that's ever lived in Nashville has been in that band, like when they were green, kind of, and except for myself, of course. And it was a huge coup for me to get the gig because I had never played country before. I never played bluegrass or the stuff that band is known for. And Daniel used to come in every week for years with like a tape recorder. And I mean, I knew him as the little kid, and it was weird for me because, he was like 11 or 12, and I was 21, 22. And so, I had been him up to that point, so to have a young kid coming in, asking me questions and recording hours and hours, it was just, it was like, it was weird. It still is weird for me. It's like, man, go listen, go. There's dudes better than me. I'm still trying to figure this out, bro. Go find something else, man. I ain't your boy, but I love him a lot. And, we really haven't caught up in quite a while, but, there was a time there where we were real close, had him over to the house a bunch and turned him on to records he didn't know about and stuff. It was real cool.
He's a person that made me feel a lot better. Not a lot better, I guess, but he made me feel better about myself. And that, because, you see real accomplished players like he is and like you are, and guys like me are like, oh man, like I can't do that. And then he was like, well, I had to work at it. He's like, I would sit down. There was a period where I would sit down and play for 14 hours a day. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
I haven't done that, so maybe that is attainable by a normal human. Cause if, I've never put that kind of work into it ever.
Well, it does require that amount of work and he's absolutely right in that. And I will expand upon that to say that, man, the worst thing that any of us can do in our lives is look at somebody in the lane next to us, because all we have is the lane we're in. And it's just like, it does no good, like it's just, and I understand we all do it. I do it. Everybody does it and goes, oh man, I wish if I could just be like that cat, but it's just so destructive. And it's just so, I don't know. I've tried to push all that kind of crap as far away from me as possible because it's so counterintuitive to joy, and it's like one of the things in life, just, in the last few years is just, I got hip to sort of the, how shall I say, I had spent the majority of my life chasing pleasure. Okay. And up to that point, and it's like, pleasure is fleeting. It doesn't feed your soul. And it usually costs something. Whereas joy is omnipresent and free. And it's not to say that like everything is awesome, because things are going to go up and they're going to go down. But the thing about cultivating joy is it's like a muscle that I've like learned, that I'm learning how to use correctly. And it's like with music, all of us that play have some form of I'm trying really hard not to swear. It's like well, no, because we're all screwed up. Like, I mean, there's something in us that feels the need. There's definitely like an obsessive thing, because it's like if you're into it and you're into the minutia and all that kind of stuff, there's definitely like some level of OCD. And then, the very need to kind of like be creative, to share that creativity with others, to be judged on it, and to get positive reinforcement from it. Like there's some deep rooted, like there's some interesting psychological things that go into that. And, that's one of the things that's really fascinating about all musicians is, I really have never met one that is somewhat extremely insecure and is messed up in a lot of similar ways as I am. And, and it's funny, man, because it's like creativity happens in spite of all that. We give a lot of credit sometimes to like when something terrible happens and like the creative purging that happens as a result of like adversity, but really it's like, the more connected you are to spirit, the more you can channel what's coming through you. The easier it really is, and so it's, I don't know, it's just the path of a musician is not unlike many others, that it's wrought with a lot of the similar potholes that it's really easy to get stuck in, and so, I don't know, I've try really hard to kind of instill in other people that it's like, whatever it is you got to say it, because again, it's like, I don't view Bill Frisell's ability over John Lee Hooker's, because they're both saying what they have to say, and that's the beauty of it. It's like, what do you got to say? But it's important because it's like, I think we all fall prey to, how do we say it? Then what do we say? Like the mechanics of how we speak on our instrument, meaning like, the technical aspect of it, the pieces of equipment, the things that are tangible about it, when really it's like, what do you have to say? What is it that you need to express? That's the important thing.
There are so many different directions we could go off of that diatribe. That was amazing. One of the things I would like you to kind of expand on, because I think I understand it, and maybe a couple of years ago I wouldn't have, but the pleasure versus joy situation, like what do you mean by that? What does that mean to you when you expand on the differences between the two?
Well, what I mean by that is chasing, like when you get pleasure from something, there's usually a crash that follows it. Okay. There's usually like a simple way to illustrate it would be to say, okay, so like you're really lusting after a piece of equipment. Okay. And then you get that piece of equipment and you're really obsessed with it and you're really excited about it. And you sort of have this manic moment of enjoyment and happiness. Okay. But then it like quickly fades away. And then it sort of goes back to the next thing you're going to obsess over that you need to get. Okay. And so that's like a shot of pleasure. Okay. That's like fleeting and it costs you something. And there's like a crash afterwards. Whereas like joy is like much more subtle and much more subdued. Whereas like joy is like simply being happy that you're going to get to play music with other people today, which I think during this pandemic has become, obviously a huge thing, that it's like, if you can get together socially distantly responsible and get to make music with other people, it's like a huge thing. And I mean, I do it a couple of times a week in my studio with my guys doing scoring work and doing other stuff. And it's the highlight of the week, and it doesn't cost me anything, and it's a lasting feeling. It's like, I feel good, Like I feel good knowing it's coming up, and I feel good afterwards. Like, man, that was great. So that's like two sort of, and I mean, we can expound upon it many different ways, but it's just like, joy is broader. Joy is like kind of focusing on the elements that are the most important, because I feel like it's like when we start to get manic and we start to hyper focus on the things that are incredibly specific, it's like we start to, at least I start to miss the point of what it is I'm trying to do or say or whatever. And unfortunately, my joy kind of ends up going out the window then, because I'm too busy being distracted by other things. And music is hard that way, man, because it's like there's so much to obsess over. There's gear, there's how well you are prepared. Did I learn that right? Is this any good? Is that person at the bar, that's got their arms folded, are they judging me when they might not even be paying attention? They might be pissed off because they just got in a fight with their wife. You know what I mean? Like it's all these things that enter your brain that aren't doing you no good, and it's like just constantly trying to hit the reset button so that you can just breathe and, let music channel through you. Because I do believe that we're just a vessel for it. I think that music happens through us, not because of us, which also sort of strips away any of the kind of pompousness that you can assign to yourself or others for that matter, because it really, I mean, it's just, because put it this way, like to expand upon that notion, like how many times have you like had a really great playing night, and it's like you show up to the next session or jam night or gig or whatever it is, and it's like your intention is for it to be as good as that great night, right? Like you got the same rig, you got the same pair of underwear on, whatever it is, but then it's terrible. You just don't play good. You just can't get in it, and it's like that, that perfectly encapsulates how not in control of it we are.
100%. Like the best things that I've ever done creatively, whether it was music or something else, I got done with it and I stood back and looked at it and I'm like, well, I didn't do that. Like that couldn't have came out of me. Like I'm not capable of these things, those are very few and far between for me, but still sometimes I get done with like a project and I'm like, wow, I can't believe that I was involved in that. Me, like, who am I? I'm just some former mechanic. Like, what's going on here? Like, this doesn't make any sense.
There's that joy, man. There's that joy. There it is. Because we get out of the way of it and let it happen. Because that's the thing. I think that we can keep it from happening by getting in the way of it, And that goes into, musicians, again, are deep-rooted insecurities and our need for approval and all these things that like are inherently like deeply rooted in the very core of most musicians on this planet. We all tend to try and control way more than we need to, and we don't even know we're doing it because it's just how our makeup is, and so it's like trying to untangle that so that you can just let go and be free and allow the muse to happen, and and that's the beauty of looking up to people like Miles and Coltrane are the easiest ones to kind of look at in that, especially Miles. But Yusef Lateef, shoot, man. I mean, I could listen to Herbie Hancock interviews all day, son, because it's like the centeredness that he portrays. That's at the root of it, because it doesn't come from you.
It reminds me of this scene from the Sound City documentary. I don't know if you ever saw that, but it was.
Oh yeah, sure, I saw it.
Okay, yeah. Do you remember when he's in the studio, with Paul McCartney, And they're like, man, I wish it was always this easy. And he just looks over and he's like, it is. He's got that channel open, man. No, he's not. He's got the channel open. I think some people, and I did initially, took that as like, oh, for Paul McCartney, it's always that easy. But no, what he's trying to say is like, just do it. Just let it happen.
That's it. That's it. Worry about the editing of it and all that other stuff later. No, he couldn't be more correct. And I do remember that. And I have a really funny Paul McCartney story.
Let's hear
I actually got to spend a day with him one time.
What? Oh, man.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy, man.
So Paul McCartney, you're hanging out with Paul McCartney. Tell me more about this.
Yeah. So I had known for years because David Kahn had produced 2 of Paul's solo records in the early 2000s and had put together the band with Abe Laboriel and Rusty Anderson and all that. He had put that band together for Paul. And he's worked on, he's continued to work with Paul on lots of different projects since. Basically anytime there's something live, whether it's a Saturday Night Live performance or it's the Budokan video that came out a couple of years ago or whatever, like David is involved. And so all the years I've been working with David, there were many occasions where like his cell phone rings and it's Paul, like he was editing. I remember we were working on a record. His David's studio used to be at the old power station in New York, which was called Avatar until fairly recently. And David had his own studio upstairs at Avatar for years. And we were up there working on something, and he was doing all the mixing for when Paul went back and played the Budokan in 2015 or whatever it was. And like Paul was going to come in a couple of hours to like watch it and approve it. And I'm like in the back of my mind thinking, can I stay?
Right.
So anyway, none of those situations ever panned out, and I'd had enough near misses that I'd kind of put it out of my head. So I was up in New York doing this record and being all big time, and the last day of the session, I was going to go in and just do overdubs with David, and then a car was going to come and take me to the airport at like 5 p.m. for a night flight back to Nashville. And so I show up and I'm drinking my coffee in the lounge, and David comes in and very nonchalantly says, oh man, Paul's going to come by today. And I'm like, are you, what? And he's like, Paul's going to come by in a little bit. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, so let's get a bunch of the stuff done. This is what a bro-y is. He's like, let's get a bunch of the stuff done. And then there's this one track I just want you to go crazy on. I want you to do all the things that, play slide. I want you to do all the things that you do well. And like totally setting me up to win, right? Like I'm going to let you just do what you do in front of Paul. And I'm like, hell yeah. And so we get through the stuff. We get through a bunch because we had a lot to work on. It was like a whole record, and so we'd been tracking for 2 days. And so I went back and did everything he wanted me to do. And sure enough, man, Paul shows up, and he's Paul, and we shake hands and we meet in the control room, and he sits there. He's like, David's like, yeah, we still got some stuff to do, and I'll never forget. Paul's like, oh, it's okay, man. Go ahead and do what you're doing. I love watching sessions. And I'm like, oh my God. And so he sits down. He sits down in the couch, at the back of the control room, and I do this, I do this thing, and then after the track is over, after I'm done doing what I'm doing, Paul gets up and he's like, David, man, I hope you don't mind, but I'm hearing something. And David, like any other human being, is like, of course, Paul McCartney, what are you hearing on this track? And
right.
So Paul gets up and he's like, JD, man, I'm hearing this part, and he sort of sings me this signature line kind of thing that was so simple that I would have never thought of it. And he's like, yeah, man, David, roll the tape. JD, I'll show you right where to put them. Put one here, And I was like, okay. And so Paul's directing me where to put these things, and it was just crazy. And so we get done with that, and then he pulled out this little harmonica he had in his pocket. And we like jammed for a minute. Like I was playing guitar, and David, there was a piano in there, so he was playing. So we did this like weird, like with Paul McCartney playing harmonica, weird jam thing, which was hilarious. And it was incredible. It was like the dream from being a kid. And it went on for, we were together for a couple hours, and, we sat there and just talked, because all the work was done and my car wasn't there yet to take me to the airport. So we sat there and just, shot the breeze for an hour and a half, and he talked about Hamburg, and he had just had a vacation with his family in St. Bart's. He talked about that a little bit. And it was just crazy, just sitting there hanging out one-on-one with Paul McCartney. just insane, just absolutely insanity. And
that's a dream of mine. I wanna get Paul on the show. It'll probably never happen, but I want to.
Oh man. Well, what's funny is I will say this about like my interactions with him. Like, I know it was the hardest interaction of my life, and I'm not a starstruck person, but it is really, 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 really hard to hold it together with him. And he knows it. And he's very intense, but not in like he's intense because the thing I tell, and I can talk about this for a long time. I'm like condensing it down so we're not talking for 3 hours, but his vibe is very present. Like, I've never been around somebody that was more like, he was constantly scanning me. He was scanning the room. Like, he was very, it was very noticeable that he was incredibly hyper aware of everything that was going on around him. And, obviously I'm not him. I can't speak for him, but I just kind of took it as, well, that, it's obvious. There's a guy who's spent his entire life in such rarefied air, that's, I'm sure, one of the many byproducts of having to live that kind of existence, and it was fascinating to sort of witness, while at the same time trying desperately to like be cool, and right. and there was one time David shot me just, like, to talk to Paul, because obviously it's like you let Paul lead the conversation. Like, don't start interviewing, don't start asking him questions and all this kind of stuff. And I sort of found myself in the conversation that we were having. I asked him some questions, because we were talking about, like, because he had told him, it's funny, man, like, we talked about the Don Kelly band, because he was talking, there was an artist that, a really famous artist that Paul was like, sort of ridiculing, like, for being inexperienced in green and not having put the work in, kind of a thing. And like, that led to this long-winded conversation that the three of us had, where David was talking about his years playing in nightclubs and playing in piano bars and stuff before he became this successful producer, record exec, all this, and how invaluable that was. And he, talked about my time with Don Kelly, doing those thousands of 4-hour gigs with no break, and that led Paul to talk about his Hamburg days. And I couldn't help myself, because I was like, I'm sitting here with Paul McCartney and we're just talking about this. And I was like, how long did you actually play in Hamburg? Because I've heard so many different versions. And he was like, well, he's like, it was pretty loose. And he's like, we would get on, between 8 and 8:30. And he's like, we would play till at least 4 in the morning, sometimes 5, if there were people in there, you know.
Wow.
And I was like, and then it led me, like, right away, I was like, well, how many sets did you have? Like, meaning, like, how many songs? Like, how'd you fill the time? I was like, because obviously you didn't have 8 hours worth of material, you know, like, how did you break it up? Like, and he's like, well, we played 45 on, 15 off. And he's like, when we started, we didn't even have one. We just played the one over and over and over. And he's like, but we worked really, really fast. And he's like, we got to the point where we had 4 really great sets that we had worked out. And he said, and the great thing he's like, when we went back to Liverpool, he's like, we had 4 killer 45-minute sets that had originals as well as obscure covers. And he's like, so then what we did is we come back and then play in the Cavern, and I forget the other place he said, but, you know, playing in Liverpool, he's like, all you had to do was play one 45-minute set. You know, you didn't play 5 hours in Liverpool, you just played one set. And he's like, so then we took those 4 incredible sets and took the best stuff out of each of them to make one incredible set. And he actually said this. He said, and we knocked their fucking dicks in the dirt at that back in Liverpool. And it was just like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then, like, I started to, like, ask another question, and David, like, shot me a look of terror, like, shut up. He's being cool.
No more
with
questions.
You. Yeah, he's like, stop now. He's being cool, man. You know. And it's funny because, like, afterwards, like, we talked afterwards. And he said, yeah, man. He's like, I shot you, you know. I was like, I'm really sorry about that look. You know, I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself, you know. And he's like, no, I understand. I was just trying to help you, because he's like, you know, Paul has a way of shutting down a conversation if he doesn't want to have it, you know. And he was like, you were totally in. He was being really cool. And he was, you know, he's like, he's not like that all the time, you know. So he's like, you had a really chill, cool version of him. And he's like, I was just trying to help you. You know? I was like, no, thank you. So.
Yeah, man, that's incredible. I can't imagine being able to sit down with somebody like that. You know, I mean, he's a dude at the end of the day, like we all are.
Yeah, but
just
he's not.
The depth of experience. you know, like the depth of that guy's experience and what he's seen and what he's done, and, like, there's not hardly anybody else like that. There probably isn't anyone else like that.
No, there certainly isn't. So, you know, it was an incredible experience, and one that obviously I'll always hold dear, and you know, like everybody else, you know, had that dream as a kid, and, you know, one day you're sitting in the middle of it, you know, and it's just crazy how things happen. And yeah, I mean, you know, what can I say, man? You know, I pooped myself several times during that experience.
I think that's one of those experiences that you relay to people. Like, I've never gotten to do that, obviously, but I've definitely gotten the opportunity to speak with some of my songwriting heroes on this show, and through doing this, it's like, if I was to give anybody any advice that is just, like, looking to do something, it doesn't matter what it is, just start, and it'll evolve over time, and it'll change, and
Sure.
You know, things will happen, but, like, just get going. If you got a creative project in mind or something you want to try, just start on it and see where it leads you, because
Yeah, you just don't.
I've never gotten to talk to Paul McCartney, but I've gotten to talk to people who have talked to Paul McCartney, and that's way closer than I ever thought I would get to Paul McCartney.
You are 1 degree of separation from Paul McCartney. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's not a position I had ever thought I would be in life. So that's a thing.
Indeed.
Well, we're getting kind of close to wrapping up this episode, but you did say something earlier, much earlier in the conversation, about transitioning out of the Don Kelly band and transitioning from session work to doing your own thing. And I kind of wondered, like, what was your experience there? What did you sounded like you had something you wanted to relay to people.
Well, I just, just in that, if you feel compelled to do something, you need to do it, because the world is full of regret. And I think that if you are not happy, you need to do whatever you need to do to be happy, because being miserable is not a good way to be. And you're also going to inherently affect other people negatively in being miserable. Like, you might as well give everybody a break as well as you. And it's funny because success, we live in this world, and I'm part of this world, that it's like, oh, okay, that last post on Instagram got 1,200 likes. Okay, that's good. All right, that's good. All right, all right. We're constantly, needing to compete with ourselves, let alone compete with other people. And success looks very different, for all people, really. Because we all truly do have different things inside us that we really need and want. I think we kind of lump ourselves in with the mass populace because we're easier to market to. If we all are kind of led to believe the same things of what we want, that sort of continuation, if you will, of the baby boomer generation and before, of having possessions and this and that. And the moral of my story in that is that I was 25 when I backed out and started doing my own thing. I wasn't irresponsible with it. It's not like I just kind of threw everything down a flight of stairs and set fire to the forest and created a bunch of wreckage. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just that I set my intention on what it is that I wanted to do. And I was sitting at a red light. The story that I tell of like the breaking point for me is, sessions here in Nashville are they're union, so it's like they're divided up, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and then 10 o'clock at night, which rarely happens anymore. And so, once I'd been in Don's band for 5 or 6 years, I was doing at least a 10 and a 2 o'clock most days, at least 3, 4, 5 days a week, and then going and playing with Don for 4 hours at night. And I had finished a 2 o'clock session, got done, or got let go early. Like it was like 3:30 and I was already done. So I was like thrilled, like, oh man, I get to go home and chill out a little before I go play with Don. Like I was so excited, to have this like little respite in the afternoon. And I was driving home and I was listening to NPR, which I love NPR. And I was sitting at a red light and I like looked at the radio and I was trying to remember the last time I actually listened to music for pleasure. And I couldn't remember. And it scared me. And I was like, I hate this, this isn't fun. Like, yes, I'm grateful for the opportunity and I'm doing the best I can with it. And there's certainly parts of it that I enjoy, but I'm not digging this. This is not, the thought that ran through my head at 25 years old was, I'm too young to feel this way. I'm too young to feel this old. And so I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just set my intention on I need to do something. And it was shortly thereafter that I got contacted to go jam with who became my bandmates, Frank Swart and Adam Abershoff. Frank was playing in John Hyatt's band at the time, and Adam was doing sessions, and we got together and improvised. Frank booked a gig and we showed up and we just improvised for like 2-3 hours straight without stopping.
Whoa.
Very on the corner, Miles, Bitches Brew-esque sort of mentality. And I just felt like a light switch had been flipped inside me. And it was like, okay, this is the path forward for me. Because that felt amazing and I loved every minute of it. And, so we ended up forming a band, and, it was difficult because we all made the decision to go all in on it, which meant that, we did tons and tons and tons of touring regionally where we lost money. And as a result, turned down lucrative work to go do it, to go lose money. And it was incredibly disheartening, and it was incredibly difficult. But then, eventually we ended up getting a record deal and went on the road. And unfortunately, Frank didn't make it that long. I ended up getting someone else into the band. And, that has continued where, at least up until the pandemic, these last couple of years, it's been awesome because it's like, I'm not some big star or anything, but I can go out and tour and play a bunch of shows and make a good living and make records and do what it is that I want to do. And it's only been getting better ever since, But even that so the main concept is just, if you're not happy, you got to do something about it. But then also, people ask me all the time, like, well, how do you get a manager? How do you get an agent? How do you get a record deal and all this kind of stuff? And, everybody wants to believe that there's like a, it's a lottery. Like you're just going to, one day it's just going to happen. And, you're going to win the lottery and like, this is how you do it. And it's like, no, man, you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to work really hard, and you're going to have to lose money, and you're going to have to humble yourself to the process. And, once you kind of start to get something going, they'll find you. The situations will present themselves where you meet the right people and things will fall in line, but it's, nobody ever seems to want to hear that, It's like, oh, if you do this or do that. And it's like, no, man, just get out there and lose money and figure out how to survive, What do you want me to tell you, The hardest climb is from 0 tickets to 100 tickets sold. And then the next hardest is from 100 tickets to 200 tickets, and so on. It's hard.
I have some parallels to you in that it's a different thing, obviously, but it's a similar kind of attitude. I literally, at my last job, why does it always happen in the car? That's
I don't know.
I was
probably
driving.
You're not distracted. Yeah.
Yeah. I was driving, and I had a good job. It was a good job. It was the type of job that I had worked my entire life to try to get, and I was about the same age as you. I think maybe I was like 26 or so. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, was sitting there in the parking lot getting ready to go home, and I was like, I've worked so hard to get here to where I thought I needed to be, and it sucks. Not because of the people or anything like that. It was just like I was unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And I was making a good living. It was the exact type of job I'd tried my whole life to get. I'd been there for quite a while, and I was like, why every single day do I wake up and I'm dreading the entire day, every single day. And so I just kind of did some self-searching, I guess, and I was like, well, you put yourself in this position, you dingus. Like, you can put yourself in a different position, so work on that. Yeah. And I started down this path, not really knowing where it was going to lead, not really fully understanding how it was going to work, and yes, lost money for several years. And finally, was able to figure it out.
People never want to hear that, though, especially people who have succeeded in other aspects. They never want to hear that. And it's like, sorry, that is always going to be the answer, because there's no security net for doing what it is you're supposed to do. You're just supposed to do it, and it'll work out if it's supposed to. Mm-hmm. So yeah, man, absolutely. We bros. Yeah. We bros. Preach.
Yes. So give it a try, people. The worst thing that could ever happen is you'll end up right back in the same position where you're at now. Give it a try, you know?
Yeah, it's not,
That's what I say.
What do you got to lose? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, there's just no reason not to, And you never know. I mean, that's the funny thing about life. And I mean, not that I'm some, guru here. I'm just another knucklehead trying to figure it out like anybody else. But man, it just always seems the older I get, and especially now having a little daughter, who's going to be 2 in November. It's just crazy because it's like the most profound things that have shaped my life seemingly just kind of fell out of the sky in my head because I was doing the right thing at that moment. It's not because I went and, tackled some head of whatever, and like snuck into an elevator and like held him up at gunpoint and said, "You must give me a chance." It's like, it's not, that's never, it doesn't work like that. At least not in my experience. It's like, you're just doing what you're supposed to do and you're a good dude. And, people like to help people that help themselves, and people like to help people that are good people, So it's like, if you're helping yourself and you're trying to be a good human, you're going to attract groovy people. If you're the opposite of that, then that's what you're going to attract.
It's very true. Very, very true.
And as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I've got to say about that.
Well, that's perfect. This is a good point for us to get into the classic questions and wrap up this main part of the episode.
Sounds
all right,
great.
Cool. So first of all, we've been talking a lot about stuff, and you've said some really cool things in my book. But here's your chance to put up a billboard, tell people anything you want to tell them. Where can they find you, or do you have a message for the people, or whatever you want to say? This is your opportunity to do it.
Oh man, well, my message is, just whatever it is that you got to do it well. Don't half-ass anything, full-ass it. I think that's like a Ron Swanson quote from Parks and Rec. It's like, don't half-ass 2 things, full-ass 1 thing. So, no, just be groovy, be a good human. Always try and look at your perspective outside of the one that you're viewing through. It's really important. I think we're sort of being conditioned to be hyper-focused on one point of view in all our interactions. Just the way that algorithms and everything is working these days, it kind of teaches us to not, develop the best critical thinking skills and be easily easily distracted. I think it's, use the technology for what it's good for, which is accessing tons and tons of awesome content that's out there, that's easily accessible, that was not at one point not that long ago. And as far as as far as my stuff and I'm concerned, JD Simo Music is my moniker on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. And I have a new record coming out August the 21st. And man, there's new stuff almost every day. I mean, because of the pandemic, we are in the full-fledged content wars, 2020. And so, I mean, I've got new videos and collaborations and podcasts of my own and live streams and all this kind of stuff happening on almost a daily basis. So check me out on there and just be groovy. And I always say, keep it greasy, keep it greasy, man, because we all need more lubricant, man. There's too much friction.
That's right. Things need to smooth out a little bit.
Indeed.
Perfect. I love that.
Groovy.
All right, here we go. So the last questions of the podcast. Here we go.
Great.
I know we didn't really talk about effects all that much on this episode, but what is your favorite Boss pedal?
My favorite Boss pedal? Ooh, the DD2.
Oh, there you go. Solid.
The DD2, because it's a $100 pedal that... I learned about it from Dan Dugmore, who's a real famous steel player here in town, and he was like, JD, everybody pays big money for the red or purple, whatever it is, the DM2. And he's like, this is better. And he's like, here, I have both of them. Listen to them. And I was like, yeah, you're right. The DD2 is like really warm and sounds like a tape to a certain extent. And the DM2 is really dark, and it's very useful. Again, it's like $100. I've turned a lot of people onto them. It's like, man, get you one of those. That's as good as anything you're gonna find, and it's $100.
The DD2, solid answer. I like that. All right, here's the one that gets people in trouble. Here's the one that generates the controversy on every episode.
Okay.
What's your favorite kind of pizza?
Oh man, there's so many. To be honest with you, my favorite type of pizza, I'm from Chicago. Love Chicago style pizza. Grew up eating Lou Malnati's. I love New York style pizza. I am a frequent visitor of Lombardi's, in particular, down in Little Italy, every time I'm there. But I actually have a strong preference for Detroit style pizza. Sort of thick, not even that many people even know what Detroit style pizza is, but it's sort of like, it's a pan pizza that has a real buttery kind of crust. And I feel it's a very undervalued type of pizza. It's a real soulful type of pizza. I love Detroit. There's a lot of stuff, especially the Norman Whitfield era of Motown and stuff, and Dennis Coffey, and the first Funkadelic record, which is a huge record for me, was made up there. So yeah, my answer is going to be Detroit style pizza, preferably with pepperoni on it.
All right. I have yet to have a legit Detroit style pizza, which is weird for how many pizzas I've tried, but I need to experience this.
It's really good, man.
I need to experience the Detroit.
It's really good, man. There's a lot of different places. Like, I have a really decent place near my house here in Nashville that has it, and actually, one of the best ones I ever had, I can't remember, I'll remember the name in a bit, but I was actually in Portland, Oregon. There's a really good place. My buddy Gil Devine from Divine Noise Cables took me there, and I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, they're around. Man. I'll find out.
It's close to me.
I'll send you an email.
Know.
I'll find out. I just can't remember the name because it was a show day, and he was like, here, I'm taking you to get pizza. I know you dig it. So
Portland is secretly a really, really good town for pizza. It really is. People don't believe me when I say that. Like, no, it's not on the East Coast. It's not legit. Like, no, it is legit.
There's that one pizza place that always sells out. I can't remember what it's called. Another thing that Gil Devine and his wonderful wife Nicole hit me to, and I can't remember. I'll
is it
send
a
you
Pizza Shoals? Is that place?
I don't know. I'm having a brain fart. But yes, I would agree with your sentiment there. Portland has a lot of great food just in general. It's one of the great food towns of our country. It is.
It's the like my favorite thing about living around here is the food. It's so
good.
No,
I've had so many great meals. I mean, we come through, typically come through about once a year, and the last couple times we've played the Revolution Hall, and it was, yeah. I mean, I love your town a lot.
I love your town, so the feeling is mutual.
Groovy, man.
Right on, dude. All right, everybody, this has been epic. So thanks so much for coming on. This was really, really a fun chat,
dude. Thank you.
And we're gonna go do some more of it on Patreon for those special people. Indeed. Well, God bless you. Thanks for having me. Absolutely. All right, everybody. For JD, this is Blake, and as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right, there you go. There you have it. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, because I enjoyed it an awful lot. And again, just as a quick reminder, you want to support the show and get more content for your ears, you can slide over to patreon.com/tonemob, and you can hear even more with Mr. JD Simo and myself, and man, it is so much fun. So, yeah, I think that's probably it for the plugging this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you could share this with a friend, that would mean the world to me, and I mean that honestly. Thank you so much. Talk to you next week. One last thing before we totally sign off here, I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.